I never thought I'd be the person posting something like this, but here I am, trying to figure out if I'm losing my mind or if I actually did the right thing. When my ex and I split 3 years ago, my stepmom Carol stepped in to help with my son Jake. I'd never really liked her. My dad married her when I was 15, 2 years after my mom died, but I was desperate. Jake was barely a year old, and I was working 50-hour weeks just to keep us afloat. Carol offered free childcare, home-cooked meals, and a burst of energy, almost as if she'd been waiting her whole life to play the role of a grandmother. At first, it felt like a miracle, but soon, little things started adding up. I'd meal plan every Sunday, since Jake's dairy allergy meant even a bite of cheese could land him in the ER, but Carol insisted on buying her own groceries, arguing that growing boys needed real food. I didn't realize how serious things were until I discovered a box of expired strawberry baby food mixed with yogurt in the pantry. When I confronted her, she acted as if she'd never even heard of Jake's allergy, even though I had texted her about it twice that month. My husband, Ryan, whom I married last year and who is usually the calm one, was the one who encouraged me to speak up. That night, he told her quite plainly that the arrangement wasn't working. Carol ended up crying for about an hour, insisting that we didn't appreciate her sacrifices and reminding me of how she had put her life on hold to rescue me after the divorce. I felt awful afterward. In a way, she wasn't entirely wrong. After my ex left, my dad's side of the family had blamed me for driving him away, and Carol was the only one who showed up. Then, last Thursday, Carol canceled babysitting at the last minute for a friend's birthday party. Ryan had to skip a work trip to watch Jake, which meant missing an important client dinner. He didn't yell, but I could tell he was frustrated by the way he kept resetting his phone. That same night, I found a half-empty vodka bottle in Carol's nightstand. It was clear she'd been drinking while watching Jake. When I brought it up, she denied that she had been drinking, dismissing my concern as paranoia and claiming the bottle was old, even though a receipt in her trash was dated just 2 days earlier. Eventually, Ryan snapped and told her that if she didn't clean up her act, she needed to leave. Carol packed a suitcase and left that night, slamming the door so hard that it woke Jake up. The next morning, my dad called in a fury, insisting that I had driven a wedge between Ryan and her, and reminding me that family isn't one to abandon each other. Meanwhile, Jake still longs for Carol's bedtime stories. He had loved the elaborate pirate adventures she used to narrate with different voices, and now he cries whenever I try to read to him. The guilt was bad enough, but then I checked my credit card statement and discovered $300 in charges from Whole Foods. Premium steaks, fancy wine, the kind of items I would never normally buy. Ryan froze the card, yet part of me still hoped it was all just a mistake. I couldn't help but remember how Carol used to slip $20 into my purse when I was a single mom, back when even a small amount of money meant gas money or diapers. While cleaning out the garage last weekend, I came across a box of my mom's old things. Inside was a letter she had written a month before she died. In that letter, she warned me to be cautious of Carol's performative kindness, pointing out that Carol always needed to be seen as the hero, even if it meant creating a crisis. I had nearly forgotten about it, maybe even wishing I could. Yesterday, Carol sent a text demanding an apology for what she felt was the humiliation she'd experienced. Ryan advised me to ignore her, but then my dad sent a photo of her in the ER, claiming she was there for stress-induced chest pains. Against Ryan's advice, I gave her a call. During the conversation, she broke down, saying that she felt replaced by him and that I had chosen a stranger over family. I even offered to pay for therapy, but she ended the call abruptly. Later that night, Ryan discovered Jake's allergy medication in the bathroom trash. It wasn't expired, it was simply misplaced. Apparently, during her last visit, Carol had rearranged the cabinets in an attempt to be helpful, which resulted in Jake's EpiPen being buried under a pile of old towels. I'm at a loss. Part of me wants to believe that Carol is just messy, not malicious, that she's lonely and trying too hard, but then I keep hearing my mom's voice from that old letter, shaky yet certain, and I can't unsee the way Jake's face lights up whenever he talks about her. Am I protecting my son, or am I punishing her for not being the kind of mom I once needed? Now for the first update. It's been 2 weeks since I last posted, and things have just escalated. I'm still not sure if I'm doing the right thing, but I'm starting to realize that right might not exist here. Just survival. Carol showed up at our house 3 days after Ryan told her to leave. She stood on the porch with a stuffed dinosaur for Jake, her voice shaky as if she had been crying. She said she missed her grandson and offered the toy as a peace offering, but Ryan didn't let her in. I watched from the kitchen window, my hands gripping the edge of the sink, with Jake's cereal bowl still in front of me. Part of me wanted to run out there and hug her, while another part remembered the vodka bottle, the misplaced EpiPen, and the look in her eyes when I asked about those credit card charges, as if I were the one betraying her. My dad called later that night without any preamble. He told me that if I didn't fix things with Carol, I'd be cut out of his will. He mentioned that her health was declining and that the stress from our ongoing feud was taking its toll on her. I almost laughed in disbelief. When I was 16 and came down with mono, Carol made me soup every day for a week, yet she would also complain at church about how exhausting it was to care for me. It was what my mom had once dismissed as performative kindness. Still, hearing Dad's gravely voice, the same tone he used when my mom was sick, made my chest ache. Then the daycare called. Carol had tried to pick up Jake, claiming I'd given her permission. The director explained that Carol had appeared agitated and had been pacing by the front desk until security intervened. When I arrived, Jake was building blocks in the corner, completely oblivious to the tension. A teacher handed me his backpack with a tight smile and mentioned that Jake had said his grandma had been gone for a while. I nodded, my throat too dry to form a reply. After that, Ryan insisted on getting a restraining order. Carol left 6 voicemails in one night, in which she accused him of being excessively controlling and claimed that he had stolen her family. Her voice had been slurred and furious. I listened to the messages once before deleting them. The legal paperwork felt like an admission of defeat, as if I had failed to mend things. Then I discovered the key. I had found it under the doormat, a battered copy, clearly matching ours. Ryan's face went pale when I showed it to him, and he stated that Carol had made it before she left, leaving no room for discussion. We changed the locks, yet I still found myself checking the windows at night and startling at every car that slowed near the house. On a Tuesday morning, I received a credit score alert indicating a 50-point drop. It turned out that Carol had opened a gas and electric account in my name the previous month. When I confronted her about it, she didn't try to deny her action. Instead, she calmly declared that I owed her after everything she had done. She insinuated that I would let my own family starve. I hung up the phone quickly, but not before hearing her accusing me of being ungrateful, just like my mother. Later, my dad sent a check for the full amount Carol had taken, $2,300, with a note saying that she was all he had left. I tore the check into pieces. Let him hate me. Let them all hate me. But then, while going through old texts, I discovered one from last year in which she had explained that the insurance wouldn't cover her physical therapy and asked if I could spare anything. I had sent her $2,000 without a second thought. Meanwhile, Ryan is talking about suing her. He even printed out a list of lawyers and left it on the kitchen counter, almost as a challenge. I haven't touched it. How can you take legal action against someone who used to sing lullabies to comfort you after nightmares, who would hold your hair back when you were sick at 17, and then later tell your dad that you had been drinking? Jake drew a picture at school last week that showed a stick figure with Carol's red curls floating in a scribbled sky. At the top of the drawing, he had written something to indicate that his grandma was gone, though the letters were uneven. His teacher later told me that he had cried when the red crayon ran out. I sat in the parking lot after pickup, staring at that drawing as if the paper might somehow change under my grip. At the grocery store, I ran into Lisa, who used to work with Carol. At the library, she looked away when I waved, as though she had been caught off guard. When I asked her how Carol was doing, she grimaced and explained that Carol had borrowed $500 from her last fall, claiming it was for her sister's cancer treatment. Lisa later found out that her sister had actually been dead since 2009. The apology letter arrived yesterday. It was handwritten on the same floral stationery that Carol had used for my birthday cards. The note expressed her regret and her longing to be part of our lives. Ryan also found receipts stuffed inside the envelope, showing that she had spent $1,800 at a downtown boutique just 2 days earlier. Receipts for a new purse that looked like it was made of leather, the kind she had always admired at the mall. Last night around 3 a.m., Jake woke up screaming that his grandma was angry, his fists tangled in his dinosaur pajamas, and I rocked him until his breathing slowed, pressing my cheek against his sweaty hair. Ryan stood silently in the doorway, as if waiting for me to choose a side. Him or her, sanity or chaos. I don't know what happens next. The lawyer's number remains on the counter. Carol's voicemails are gone, but I still hear her crying when I try to sleep. When Jake asks when she's coming back, I tell him it will be soon, although Ryan insists that isn't true. All I know is this: family isn't supposed to make you feel like a hostage. But love doesn't come with a receipt, and I can't return the years I believed she was what I needed. Right now, the house is quiet. Jake is at daycare, Ryan is at work, and I'm sitting here staring at a torn-up check and holding a stuffed dinosaur, wondering if forgiveness is a gift or a grenade. Now for the second update. It's been a month since my last update, and honestly, I'm more lost than ever. Some days, I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a storm, holding an umbrella made of tissue paper. I know it's useless, but I keep gripping it anyway, because letting go would mean admitting I'm soaked. Carol was hospitalized 3 weeks ago after a fall. My dad called with a cracking voice, clearly upset. He explained that she had tripped over a rug in their apartment and bruised her ribs, and he kept repeating that she was too frail to be alone, as if I were responsible for her care. Ryan warned me not to go, saying it was a trap, but guilt has a way of bending your knees until you're kneeling at someone else's altar. When I walked into her hospital room, she looked small and fragile, certainly not harmless, but breakable. Her hair was flat and her nails were chipped. She reached for my hand and said that she just wanted to come home. Home. That word used to mean Sunday dinners and having someone to call when Jake had a fever. Now it feels like a battleground with landmines hidden in every apology. Still, I agreed to take her home, insisting it was only temporary until she got back on her feet, as I told Ryan. He didn't argue, but he started sleeping on the couch. For a week, Carol was almost perfect. She made Jake's favorite dinosaur-shaped pancakes, kept her vodka out of sight, and even folded Ryan's laundry. I let myself hope that maybe the fall had sparked something positive in her, that maybe we could fix things. Then, on day 8, I overheard her on the phone. I was grabbing a soda from the garage fridge when I heard her mocking laugh cutting through the gap in the door. I gathered that she was ridiculing Ryan, saying that he had a pathetic savior complex, that he fancied himself as some knight in shining armor, and that he was just one spreadsheet away from a midlife crisis. I stood there with the can sweating in my hand and realized I'd been foolish again. When I confronted her later, she simply shrugged and remarked that I had always been too sensitive. That night, I took back the house key, remembering how she had been tidying up our office with her fingers lingering in drawers full of tax documents. The argument that followed was ugly. The fight turned worse when she compared me to my bitter mother, a comparison that, even though my mother had been gone for 15 years, still managed to hurt. Carol had once told me that my mom was jealous of the bond we shared, and now I wonder if she saw right through her, even in the end. In a huff, Carol left, slamming the door so hard that the framed photo of Jake's first birthday rattled off the wall. 2 days later, a collections notice arrived for $4,500 on a personal loan I never took out. Her handwriting, loopy and deliberate, made it clear that she had forged my signature on the paperwork. Ryan wanted to call the cops immediately, but I stalled by making excuses about giving her a chance to fix it. Even though I was terrified of what might happen, whether they would arrest her or not, an officer taking my statement recognized her name. Tapping his pen against his notebook, he remarked that she had a history of petty fraud that was never significant enough to stick. He asked if I wanted to press charges, and when I said yes, I felt so overwhelmed that I ended up throwing up in the precinct bathroom. The next morning, my dad disowned me via a text message that screamed I had chosen a stranger over family. I ended up blocking his number, but not before saving the message. Sometimes I read it just to feel something other than numb. Carol escalated things even further. She showed up at Jake's soccer game and began crying to the other parents, complaining that we were keeping her from seeing her grandson. I was waiting in the snack line when I first heard her familiar performative waver, the same one she had used at Mom's funeral. By the time I reached her, she had already hugged 3 moms and casually mentioned details about my troubled childhood. Later, the coach pulled me aside and quietly noted that he didn't want any drama. I snapped, telling him about the forged loan, the stolen key, and the way Carol sometimes looked at Jake as if he were a pawn rather than a person. The coach apologized afterward, but the damage was done, and now the team's group chat falls silent whenever I walk by. Ryan got his promotion. He should have been thrilled, but when he broke the news, his tone was flat, like he was reading off a grocery list. Later, as he lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, he said, "We couldn't keep living like this." I wanted to argue, but I didn't know what to say. Our marriage now feels like a Jenga tower, with half its blocks missing. While cleaning out Carol's room, I found a stack of therapy worksheets from 2012 filled with her rushed scribbles. They contained thoughts about feeling empty unless someone needed her, and questioning whether she mattered if she wasn't helpful. For a moment, I pitied her, but then I remembered the $4,500. Last Tuesday, I received a text from her saying she was in rehab and including a photo of a sunny courtyard with a fountain, claiming she was healing. Later, after performing a reverse image search, I discovered that the photo was taken at a spa in Arizona, so I didn't reply. I wasn't sure what was left to say. Yesterday, while Jake and I were building Legos, his small hands struggling to snap a piece into place, he asked if Grandma Carol was a bad person. I froze, caught off guard, not knowing how to explain to a 5-year-old that monsters sometimes wear familiar smiles and caring gestures. I ended up telling him that Grandma was sick and that sick people can hurt others without meaning to. He nodded quickly and then asked for apple juice. Our lawyer says that Carol could face up to a year in jail, and I've managed to stall the paperwork twice already. Ryan thinks it's because I'm weak, but he doesn't understand. It's not just about her. It's about a part of me that still hopes people can change. The part that remembers Carol teaching me to drive when I was 16. I remembered how I clutched the passenger seat as I nearly sideswiped a mailbox, and how she laughed afterward, bought me a milkshake, and kept quiet from Dad. Now I sit here typing at 2 a.m., while Ryan snores downstairs and Jake's nightlight glows under his door. The unsigned paperwork sits on the kitchen table, and I can't shake Carol's latest rambling apology that keeps playing on loop in my head. I don't really know what's right anymore. Every choice I make feels like a betrayal of someone I love. Maybe that's the real cost of surviving, learning to hold your breath while you drown. Now for the final update. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and I'm still figuring out how to exist in this new version of normal. Some days, the quiet feels like a gift. Other days, it just feels eerily quiet. Carol was arrested last month. The bank called about suspicious activity. It turns out she'd opened 2 more credit cards in my name, maxing them out on luxury hotel stays. When the police showed up at her apartment, she tried to pin it on me, claiming I'd given her permission. They didn't buy it. Later, she called from jail, screaming that I'd ruined her life and that I'd always been jealous of her bond with Jake. I hung up mid-rant and blocked her number. My hands shook for an hour afterward, not from fear, but from a strange, hollow relief, like I'd finally dropped a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The next day, my dad left a voicemail. His voice was frayed, like old rope. He said Carol had confessed to everything. The forged loans, the fake medical bills, even the lie about her supposed stress-induced ER visit. He apologized, admitting he'd been blind and had let her manipulate him because he felt so lonely after Mom died. I deleted the message. Forgiveness isn't like a vending machine where you insert an apology and get reconciliation in return. At least he's been paying her court-ordered restitution, which is a small mercy. Ryan and I started couples counseling, using money we had secretly stashed in a high-yield savings account Carol never knew about. The first session was brutal. I talked about feeling guilty for upending our lives, and he admitted he'd resented me for not cutting her off sooner. The therapist thought it was a good start. I ended up crying in the parking lot afterward, but for once it wasn't about Carol, it was about us. Last week, Jake's teacher pulled me aside to mention that he had been telling his friends his grandmother was in a permanent timeout. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Later, when I asked him before bed if his grandmother had really done bad things, he just shrugged. He hugged his stuffed dinosaur and insisted that the 2 of us were not mistakes. I stayed in his room long after he fell asleep, watching his chest rise and fall. Carol took a plea deal that meant probation, financial counseling, and community service. Her lawyer said it was the best outcome, but it felt like just another Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Then, 3 days later, her probation officer called to say Carol had tried asking an old coworker for a loan, another violation of her terms. Now she's serving 90 days. When I heard the news, I sat on the kitchen floor and stared at the fridge magnets Jake had arranged into a lopsided heart. I expected to feel vindicated, but instead, I just felt tired. Running into her at the grocery store was surreal. I was comparing prices on pasta sauce when I spotted her in the frozen aisle. She looked thinner, and her hair, now dyed a harsh black instead of its usual caramel, made her seem unrecognizable. Our eyes met for a moment, and I caught a flicker of panic as her grip tightened on her cart. Then she abandoned it and hurried toward the exit, leaving a trail of lean cuisines and ice cream sandwiches behind. I didn't follow her. I ended up selling the designer purse she'd bought with my stolen credit card, $280 at a consignment shop. The cash felt dirty in my hand, so I donated it to a food bank downtown. A volunteer thanked me, and I nearly remarked that it was like blood money, but I bit my tongue. Later, when Jake helped me drop off the cans and chattered on about how we were helpers, I let him believe that. The worst part was the photo I found while cleaning out the hall closet, a Polaroid of Carol and me at my high school graduation. She had her arm around me with a wide, camera-ready smile, but her eyes looked empty, as if she were posing with a stranger's child. It hit me then that in all the memories I'd clung to, the driving lessons, the bedtime stories, she was never truly present. Everything felt performative, just a stand-in for the mom I lost. Things with Ryan are slowly improving. His boss recommended him for a leadership conference in Denver, and he came home with brochures and a half smile I hadn't seen in months. We even started eating dinner at the table again instead of in front of the TV. It's awkward sometimes, the silence between us, but we're learning to fill it with little things, like how Jake aced his spelling test or the way the neighbor's cat keeps sneaking onto our porch. Last night, we burned all of Carol's letters. Every apology, every guilt trip, every cursive lie. Ryan crumpled them up and tossed them into the fireplace while Jake slept upstairs. I watched the edges curl and blacken, thinking about how Carol always loved dramatic gestures, complete with big tears and grand promises. The fire suited her. When it was over, the house didn't feel triumphant. It just felt calm, like the air after a thunderstorm. Jake started drawing again. His latest creation is taped to the fridge. 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun, with a 4th figure in the corner scribbled over in red crayon. He claimed it was a monster, though sometimes I wonder if there's more to it. I don't know if we'll ever be okay, but for the first time, okay isn't the goal. We're here, we're together, and the quiet, it's starting to sound a lot like peace.